Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the December 8th, 2020 workshop and special City Council meeting. This session will be conducted remotely, and council members will only participate electronically. For those viewing online, please ensure that you've joined this meeting using the following website address, www.lewistonmaine.gov/2020cc. If you join this meeting using any other link, you may have trouble connecting properly, and we encourage you to log out and then rejoin using the correct website address. Public comment on any item apparent on the agenda may be sent to public comment at lewistonmaine.gov prior to or during the meeting, and all comments received will be forwarded to the City Council. Members of the public who are logged into the meeting online can make a comment when invited to do so by raising your hand button in the lower center of their screen. Once they are acknowledged, their microphone will be unmuted and they will be invited to make a brief comment. Speakers will also need to be sure to unmute their mics as well. Councilors are also asked to raise their hands to make a comment. And with that said, we'll go right into the 6 p.m. workshop. Item letter A is the parking ordinance, and we expect that'll take about 20 minutes. And I'll turn that over to Denis.
Evening, Mayor and City Councilors. At the November 17th meeting, City Council meeting, towards the end of the meeting, Councilor Khalid requested that we review the parking ordinance, and specifically related to the abandoned vehicles portion of that. And I think even more specifically, potentially to adjust the abandoned vehicles definition of the number of hours from 24 to 48 hours. I didn't know if it was appropriate for Councilor Khalid if she wanted to add anything further to that, but I do have Chief Omalley here as well. And he's prepared to walk through the process that the police department goes through in enforcing that ordinance, and the policies are related to that. And really, we're here to answer any questions. But again, I didn't know if Councilor Khalid wanted to add to that opening anyway. So.
Yes, thank you, Denis. I can add a few comments. So this workshop tonight is in front of us because of an incident where a constituent car was towed, and she had to pay a fee of $300. And in this difficult time for all of us, where many people have lost their jobs, their wages, and we as a city and leaders have encouraged people to stay at home to lessen the spread of COVID-19, we should not be towing cars and putting our residents in further burden to pay for a fee where they would rather pay for their basic needs or pay a bill. So this workshop tonight, I hope the council can support in doing something as minor as updating our ordinance due to the pandemic. So I propose this temporary change from 24 hours to 48 hours regarding the parking signs on the streets until the state of emergency is lifted. So that is the only comments that I have. Thank you, Denis.
So maybe at this point in the workshop, it might be appropriate for the chief just to describe their process related to this ordinance, and then we can open up to questions and go from there.
Yeah, so I'd like to just clarify. So tonight's request from Councilor Khalid is an emergency ordinance change versus an ordinance change, which really can be done directly by the city administrator without council approval, I believe, under the state of emergency. Something to consider. I think I actually had it out, but I have to look for it. But if it's just a temporary change, then that should be considered under an emergency ordinance change, potentially.
And I do appreciate that, Mayor, for clarification, because I think there may have been misunderstanding there on that. Is that true, Councilor Khalid? It is truly a temporary change, just as long as the state of emergency is in order?
Correct. I wasn't thinking as a permanent change, just something temporary because we have encouraged our residents to stay at home due to the pandemic. So a lot of families are at home, which means that a lot of them are parking on the streets, especially the Sunnyside area. There is a lot of construction in that area right now. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
So, just my immediate reaction, thank you, Councilor Cleed, for that clarification. I think my immediate reaction then is for us to continue with the workshop so we can get everyone's feedback. Either way, action would not be taken tonight on this. It would be taken on December 15th. And what I can do, Mayor, to your point, is verify what you're saying, related to the state of emergency, and at least update. It may, to be consistent with some of the other waivers or some of the other actions we've taken related to COVID-19 and our response with other permits and other things, it may make sense for us to still take the action. But again, the action won't be tonight, so we'll be able to clarify the appropriate process between now and the 15th and give an update at that meeting as well, just to clarify if we don't have it on.
No, and I would agree with that direction. Thank you. So Chief Omalley, you want to give us a run through?
Sure. So what we usually do when we have abandoned motor vehicles is we're not driving around and chalking people's tires all over the city in residential neighborhoods. It's more often than not, we're responding to a complaint from someone in the neighborhood who's called the police department to report that a car hasn't moved. And normally it's for several days. The incident which Councilor Cleed is referring to, my parking enforcement officer placed a note on the vehicle, which oftentimes he will do in terms of trying to track the person down. We have a policy that the officers try to locate the owner of the vehicle. Unfortunately, this woman's vehicle was registered that she was living in Sabattis. It was parked over on Holland Street, so we weren't able to track her down. More often than not, although the city policy says 24 hours and then it's considered an abandoned motor vehicle, it's normally a day or two, if not even longer sometimes, by the time we actually tow the vehicle away. I will say there are instances where an officer may self-initiate an abandoned motor vehicle. When you see a motor vehicle on the street that has a flat tire or two, a broken out windshield, maybe neighbors haven't complained yet, that they will initiate an abandoned motor vehicle. So our policy is we attempt to locate the owner, but unfortunately in this instance, the vehicle wasn't registered to the location where the person was living. And so we weren't able to track her down. But more often than not, there is more than 24 hours. I will say that on the face value of it, going from 24 to 48 hours seems reasonable, especially in times of COVID. I just want the city council to be aware that we can't tow a vehicle unless it's blocking a roadway, or if it's an emergency situation where the fire department, when we have a parking van, we have to tow. I know we towed close to 75 cars this last storm, which unfortunately happens, seems like every first snowstorm that we get. So we were working on trying to do even more notifications to the citizens of Lewiston, so they'll realize that there's a parking ban. But my concern is if somebody say were to park in a handicap spot, say in front of Oak Park, and they call and we say, okay, well, we've got to wait 2 days before we can move this. If one of the businesses, somebody parks in one of those spots, we may be to put a parking ticket on it, but we'll say, okay, we're going to have to wait 2 days. So I just want the city council to be aware that more often than not, we're responding to complaints from the neighborhood or from business owners. When we show up for an abandoned motor vehicle, I'm thinking of a couple of businesses that are in residential areas. There's a Moe's Styling Center on Blake Street, here 2000 on East Avenue, that have issues with parking out in front of their business. And we could put a parking ticket on it, but someone could actually park in front of their business for 2 days before we could actually tow it, as opposed to 24 hours. So I just want everyone to be aware of that yes, we do get complaints when the vehicles get towed, but we're normally responding to complaints. That's why we're chalking the tires, waiting the 24 hours, trying to track the owner down before we tow the vehicle. Any questions?
I think at this point, Mayor, you're muted if you're trying to speak, sorry. But at this point, I think we can open it up to questions and comments, and we'll go from there.
Yep, thank you. Councilor Gelinas.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know a lot about this situation, but just hearing this out and thinking about the city and, 24 hours versus 48, I would agree with the chief. It doesn't seem like a big deal. However, I would have a hard time personally voting in favor of that unconditionally, only because there's too many exceptions to the rules. Like the one that you shared, chief, regarding the spot for individuals with, handicap plates. That's just one example, but there's a lot of examples I think that would come up. So I feel like, while I'm certainly in favor of, during the state of emergency, trying to offer some grace, I think we can't do it unconditionally. I think there's too many things that would prop up.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Rea.
Thank you. So I think my question is around, is this ordinance cited like on the street signs or anything like that? How would folks know that this ordinance A exists and B, if we make a temporary change to it?
Well, it's not posted on the street. So if there's an abandoned motor vehicle, they're parked legally, they're not getting a parking ticket because they're parked legally. It's just the extent of time that they're there in the spot. And that's just, they have to check with the city ordinances. And unfortunately, this woman's vehicle got towed, but we see that oftentimes folks that live in apartment buildings, they don't have enough parking. So they'll often want to park in front of their building. And then what happens is somebody parks a car there and no one else can ever get in. They can't park their car to bring their groceries in because this person has basically taken up that parking spot. So that's where a lot of times we see the issues come up, where there's limited parking. I know that I received complaints from several of you on the city council, people complaining about parking. And oftentimes people feel like, well, this spot in front of my house is my parking spot, when in actuality it isn't. And someone could pull up in front of your house and leave a car there, and it could be and just leave it there. And you're like, why is that car there? And then would have to wait 48 hours instead of 24 hours if we couldn't track down the person as to why is your car there. Oftentimes people will leave a note saying, my car is broken down, I'll get it towed tomorrow. That's, we don't say, oh no, we're going to tow. We allow that to happen. But there are instances where someone hasn't registered the car and then we don't know where they live. We can't find a phone number for them and we have to tow the vehicle. But they'd have to know, check maybe with their landlord or call City Hall to find out, can I park in front of my building in, it's however many days.
Okay.
It's not posted on the street.
That makes sense. I think too, as I'm thinking about this, and not totally understanding the whole back end, do the folks who are called for complaints of an abandoned vehicle, do they kind of like knock on doors, do a little checking in, or do they just go to the database?
Well, we leave notes on the cars at times,
Okay.
and we try to check our in-house system, our computer records to try to track the person down.
Okay.
So I know the instance that for the woman on Holland Street, that car was there for at least 3 days with a note on it before we towed it.
Okay, great, thank you.
And just to clarify Councilor Rea's question, so you'll run it in your in-house and then attempt contact at their residence if you have the correct address?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, we do.
thank you. Councilor Jensen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is it really, is it actually possible to enforce the 48-hour rule conditionally?
You mean the 24-hour rule or to the 48-hour rule?
I say if we did make it temporarily 48 hours, do you think that could be done conditionally, or would we? Because I don't really I get what Councilor Gelinas was saying.
Well, I'm not sure how you do that. I mean, if you're talking about different parts of the city, I'm not sure how you would do that. I mean, normally people call when the car has been there for a couple of days. They don't just call when it's 24 hours. So then by the time we then go over and chalk the tires, try to track somebody down, you're looking at least another day or two added on before somebody's actually called. My concern is if you have a business that has a parking right in front of their business and they call and complain, we can put a ticket on it because it's going to be in violation of parking, with a 2-hour limit, but then we're not going to be able to tow it for 48 hours as opposed to 24 hours. And with the winter weather coming, sometimes have people have to park that can't walk very well to go into these businesses. I'm just foreseeing some of the issues we hear already when we're not enforcing the 2 hours, sometimes parking in front of some of these businesses that you folks are going to then hear complaints about.
Yeah, No, that makes a lot of sense. As far as like businesses go, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want a vehicle be parked there for more than a day before we could actually take action. So yeah, definitely regarding businesses, I wouldn't, want, I guess, 48 hours there. Also, what kind of fines does the city impose related to like vehicles getting towed?
Well, for an abandoned motor vehicle, more often than not, the vehicle is parked legally, so there's no ticket that's put on it. It's towed away. During a snow or parking ban, because the city is the one that's towing the vehicle, and we contract because we don't have our own wrecking system, wrecking crews, tow crews. We only allow the wrecker services to charge $150 to tow during a snowstorm. But then after that, they can charge storage fees. So if this woman had to pay $300, I'm sure it's probably a combination of the tow plus the storage fees beyond 24 hours. And that varies by the different towing companies. So when we have a parking ban for snow, only towing companies we use, they have to have a lot here in the city of Lewiston where they store the vehicle. So they're not towing your car to, Lisbon or Augusta or somewhere like that, where you're going to have to really travel very far to get the vehicle.
Okay. Okay, and what was the fine amount?
Well, when there's an abandoned motor vehicle, there is no fine amount.
Yeah, but for the snowstorm. Parking ban.
I want to say that's, I don't have it off the top of my head, Councilor Jess. I want to say it's around $20.
Okay, yeah, I think, because I had a similar situation, I think it was about 30 a couple of years ago when I paid it.
Then that's probably what it is.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I figured it may be about the same, if not the same. Okay, I guess in regards to specifically that fine that people pay, I would ask that we remove that completely. If it exists solely as a deterrent, I mean, people pay a lot more to the towing company as is, a few $100s. So to me, the extra amount on there is kind of, it's just, I don't know, it seems unnecessary, and the hassle of a person having to go down to the police station and wait, 45 minutes to get someone to come there so they can, pay the ticket, so then they can then get out to, down Lisbon Street or almost in Sabatis to get their vehicle. It doesn't make sense to me. So if we could cut that part out, I'd be supportive of that. Again, not quite related to abandoned vehicles, but I thought that would be more.
I would, and that's, that would be up to the city council. I would like you to be aware of the amount of time and manpower hours that we spend when there's a parking ban. When we tow 75 cars, my offices are tied up for a considerable amount of time in terms of trying to track down owners when we have a snow parking ban to try to get them. So I know that about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe Kathy can refresh my memory of when the city council did away with the overnight parking. We used to not allow that on the majority of city streets. So we've done away with that, just as long as the city council is aware that that's manpower hours that we're using to make sure the roads are clear.
No, absolutely. My follow-up question was going to be that, well, I guess more of a comment. If it's not for a deterrent, then if it's for like covering a certain, the cost of something, I'd be curious where like the money for that goes. So just a follow-up comment. So if it exists solely as a deterrent, I think it's not a good deterrent and we should get rid of it. But if the money itself is used that like we really need, that would kind of give me some pushback and make me hold up. But if it solely exists as a deterrent, I hope that the council could get behind eliminating it.
So I believe all the fine money goes right to the general fund. Is that correct, Heather? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I've said all I need to say. So I appreciate it, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Clement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things. First of all, abandoned vehicles versus unregistered vehicles. Unregistered vehicles, Chief, if my memory serves me correctly, that's against state law to park an unregistered vehicle on a public way. And I would assume that we have an ordinance.
It's got to be over 150 days for it to be towed off the street.
Okay, but
So
it's illegal to park an unregistered vehicle on a public way?
Yes, it is. But we have the 30-day window, but so it is illegal to have an unregistered motor vehicle parked on the street.
Okay, I can appreciate everything that you've had to say. I've been in that position. I think the worst storm we ever had, we towed 150 some odd cars, and there was hell to pay for that. But you have to remove the snow. In this instance, I think it sounds like that you use absolute discretion. I think we have to allow discretion to our police in these situations. I don't think you're going out and willy-nilly self-initiating the removal of what you believe to be abandoned vehicles. I think obviously if you've got one there, the windshield's busted out and you got 4 flat tires and, you know, there's dust and dirt all over it and dust and dirt under it, and it's been there for quite a while. Yeah, I think you've got a situation that's different than what is here. Given the fact that we have this pandemic, and given the fact that the counselor from Ward 1 has indicated this is to be a temporary measure, why can't we handle this in-house with just a general memo out to the department? Look, let's bear in mind, folks, that what we're in for a situation right now, and let's not be going out and creating problems if there's no need for it. But I think we have to allow the police the discretion of being able to act under the ordinance. I think 48 hours would be perhaps unnecessary and somewhat prohibitive for the police. But if given common sense, which I believe most of our police officers exercise most of the time, then I think there's no reason for a change. And certainly I don't see a temporary change to an ordinance if we can just say, hey, we're going to lay off. I'm sure you have directed patrols. You'll hit some areas for certain violations, perhaps heavier than others from time to time because of complaints and that sort of thing. I would think this would fall under that category and can be handled administratively. I don't think we need to do anything further than that. I thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chief, do you want to respond to that thought process?
Yeah, I can say my officers actually would be very happy if it went from 24 to 48 hours because it'll cut down the amount of towing of vehicles they have to do. But I want you to understand, 99% of the abandoned motor vehicles, not that we have that many, we're responding to someone else complaining about it. So a neighbor or someone, a business owner is saying, this vehicle's been here for several days, they're parked here, we're responding to that. I do not have a directed patrol where we go around and start looking for abandoned motor vehicles or chalk tires. You know, I have a parking enforcement officer who, if it's posted, that's what he's doing. Yellow curbing, yes, definitely. Crosswalks, fire, you know, fire lanes, all those things. But we don't focus on let's try to find abandoned motor vehicles. We're responding to a complaint that's called into the police department when we end up chalking tires and end up towing a car.
Okay.
So the flip side of that is you have someone complaining because their car is going to be towed. Then you're going to have the flip side of the people complaining that we're not towing and we're not moving the cars. So I think that's where you have to strike this balance.
Okay, Councilor Clement, is your hand up to respond specifically to the chief on this?
Yes, I just wanted to make plain that I'm not suggesting that you're doing that sort of thing, directed patrol. I was talking about if you had an area where you had speeding complaints and that sort of thing, you might have a directed patrol there because you've received 25 complaints from residents on a street. I understand fully the thing on the abandoned vehicles, and I think once again that it can be handled administratively. I don't think it's a major problem. How many abandoned vehicles would you say you have in the course of a year?
Well, normally I would have said about 4 or 5, but I think this last snowstorm, we towed 75 cars. And when I left work today around 4:30 or so, about 12 still hadn't been picked up. So to me, that means those vehicles, I mean, it's now Tuesday. Those have probably been abandoned on the street for quite some time.
Okay, and I think the snowstorm is a separate instance, what we're dealing with there. But I'm not meaning to suggest that you're out there looking for opportunities to tow people's vehicles. I know from experience that that is not the case, that it's just like bad checks. Nobody wants to deal with them. And unless they have to, they don't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Rea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I came in with the documentation we have, expecting to be supportive of this change, even in the temporary way. And now I'm walking that back myself. I think the additional information the chief has provided kind of illuminates more what it actually looks like versus what it looks like on paper. And it sounds entirely reasonable to me. I do think about, you know, the kind of business district downtown and those complaints that I get. And I think it's incumbent, if you're going to own and operate a vehicle within the city, understanding what the rules are, because it would be different to me, I think, if it was all posted, you know, go check this ordinance on a sign, that sort of thing. But I think folks should should know that they're in a community, and it does stink because there's so many buildings in our area. I'm thinking of wards 1, 3, and 5 mostly, but that don't have parking that comes along with rent or owning those homes in that area. But it is incumbent upon the person who owns the vehicle, I think, more so than upon us. So I don't think I would vote in favor of it if that's helping staff to kind of formulate what the next step is.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Khalid.
I'm muted. Thank you, Mayor. So again, this proposal was encouraged by a constituent. Where she parked, the sign wasn't clear, the yellow painting wasn't clear. So also there wasn't a sign there. Therefore, she didn't know that the area she parked was prohibited or etc. And tonight she's not here. Hopefully she can come another time to really talk about the situation. And I am thinking more of a residential area to implement this rather than in a business district, especially in areas that is where I can only think about the Sunnyside area on Main Street, etc. But thank you for all your inputs and comments.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Pettengill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't really add much more to what's already been said, by Councilor Gelinas or even Councilor Rea. One thing to keep in mind too is changing this ordinance now as we're heading deeper into the winter season. Our snow crews do have to keep the roads clean and clear for everybody so that they are safe. And we don't quite yet know what the impact of COVID may be on our Public Works Department and their ability to be able to provide those services. So we really do need to make sure that we can make sure that the road stays safe for everybody and allow them to do their jobs in an easy manner. The snowstorm that we got this past weekend, wasn't that nice. My particular road, I've got a power line that the snowplow couldn't get down my street. I actually had to go shovel a little bit of my street because the plow truck couldn't make it down because the wire was hanging that low. So we don't yet know what this winter is going to bring. So anything we can do to make it easier is the better. I wouldn't be supportive of this change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from councilors? So we've got to provide some guidance to city administration. So maybe a thumbs up, thumbs down. Would that be appropriate, Kathy? Yeah. All right. So let's see thumbs up for 24 to 48 of Councilor Rea.
Oh, sorry. I don't know. Okay, sorry. I don't know what I was doing. I did want to just thank Councilor Khalid for bringing this forward. I was supportive initially, and I think that's how we moved it on to a workshop. So sorry for the bait and switch, but I think there's so many situations like this when we hear what the paperwork says versus what happens in reality, and reconciling those two. So I'm glad we had the conversation, and just want to thank her for representing her constituents so well.
Okay, so let's see any thumbs up on this. Okay, seeing none. Councilor Jensen, you had mentioned about fine. Now that you know that goes into the general fund, are you still asking council to consider that?
Yeah, I mean, $30 as someone that doesn't make a lot of money is huge.
Yeah. All right, so do we have any thumbs up on Councilor Jensen's proposal? Okay, although both were really good attempts and formulated with our constituents in mind, I don't see support from the council to move this to an agenda item. Okay, any other comments from councilors? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to item B, which is development activity in 2020. And I believe Dave Hediger is here to present on this.
Yes, Dave Hediger should be moved in as Doug Green will also present. Looks like they're coming in right now and getting settled.
Good evening, Dave and Doug.
There I am.
Okay, and we lost Dave for some reason. You're muted.
He's on his way back. I don't know where he went.
He's coming back.
I think you were trying to get Councilor Rea and accidentally hit Dave.
Put it down. I don't. Hopefully not.
I'm dizzy
Right.
from that wheel spinning, so I don't know.
All right, Dave, do you want to introduce this subject? And
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it'll be like kind of a tag team approach here. So the reason we thought we'd come before you guys is you folks recently acted upon the economic development plan. And as you'll see, or from reading this memo, there's a lot of overlap between what economic and community development does and what planning and code enforcement's doing. COVID's on everybody's mind. You guys just talked about, the impacts of COVID, and we wanted to just kind of report out what we've been seeing for activity, both on the building permit side and development review side, knowing that, there's still activity occurring, even though there's a lot of people out there that are unemployed, working from home. How's that impacted what we're seeing on the third floor? I think you're going to see a lot of overlap as Doug talks about this presentation with the comprehensive plan, the goals and strategies that you folks adopted for 2021, and the economic development plan as well. So I'll be jumping in and out of this, but I guess from here, Doug, you can kind of take the lead.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So the information that we presented to you, we try to just keep it simple, keep it in a summary fashion. For 2020, for example, we listed major developments that the planning board would have approved. And there were 18 major projects, including some 493,000 square feet of new construction potentially, 52 acres of solar projects, 297 residential units. A total value, you have to kind of be keeping this in mind, tempered with the idea that not all of these are fully in construction mode, but $308 million. A lot of that is with the upcoming Central Maine Power converter station. Of course, that's a huge price tag with that. We're looking to go to the planning board on the 28th of December. So we'll have to that's still pending. So keep that in mind. We also deal with minor development projects that are smaller in nature that the staff gets to approve as opposed to the planning board. So it has some good results from that process. And then we submitted in your packet voluminous amounts of building permit data, but trying to summarize that, breaking it out into commercial type development, and then into residential type development permits that includes renovation, all kinds of development, and then strictly new residential development, of which we looked at 35 new residential units, which is good. I don't want to belabor you with the numbers. You can see that on your the memo that we put together for you. But we think there's also room to be working with assessing department on some of the potential impacts positively on tax revenues. We think this is all very positive news. We also gave you information on 2019, so you can have some comparison. We want to keep this is a good opportunity for us to come before you, maybe on an annual basis, to give you updates on what's been happening. We also wanted to, in the memo, just take a moment to show you, to list some of the things, some initiatives that were like zone changes, text amendments, things like reducing parking requirements for multifamily development. That has been helping spur some amount of infill development, because now some properties are now feasible to develop because they don't need to provide as much parking. There's been some great zone changes that we think are going to be helpful for spurring development, whether it's in the Centreville area or the Tree Street area. We just went through that with the Design Lewiston project. We also did something that can expand non-conforming structures. So we're always looking for ways to better the zoning ordinance that can, in some ways, make it more simple, but also to make it easier to use and get barriers away that sometimes the zoning ordinance puts in place. We also wanted to kind of look ahead to the future, kind of try to ride the wave of what's been happening and look ahead to things that we think will continue to improve the quality of life here in Lewiston, and also make it more attractive for attracting businesses, bringing new residents here, all that with the effort of increasing the tax base as well. So we listed things that in looking at the comprehensive plan, like Dave mentioned, we did a thorough evaluation of all the different tasks that are included in there. And some of the things that we came up with were potentially focusing on the River Island Master Plan that dates back to 2013. We think that there's room to update that in ways that can really spur improvements. Now that the city owns the canals, I know that Public Works is doing a lot of work, starting the maintenance, clearing off the trees, that kind of thing. But we think it would be great to go a couple steps further. Two parts would be, one would be to find a target focus area that really some major improvements could be made to get access to the canal. In this target area, do some landscaping, lighting, whatever would be necessary to really make the canal in this target model area what we'd like to see for the entire canal system. And then the second part would be a broader canal master plan for how we would try to use those same techniques in the model area and expand it to the entire canal system. And there's been lots of discussion and lots of ways that the canals could really become an attraction to a large area to come. It's a very unique thing that we have here. We also want to take a look at the Beach Street area, that there's a lot of potential development with the Museum LA, the PAMCO building, the pump station, Continental Mills. There's trail systems in that area. All these things, there's a synergy that we think are really positioned with some proper planning and really a kind of a focused master plan for the Beach Street area, as well as Samard Payne Park. And we think that that same type of approach on looking at infill development in the Lincoln Street, Oxford Street area, there's a whole connection of areas that's pretty focused in the riverfront area. Again, take the Riverfront Island Master Plan to a higher level than the concept, the great concepts that we're left with. Moving along, because that's a really exciting project. We hope that we can get some traction with that. We've put some, we're looking to talk to you more in the near future with the LCIP for that, for some planning funding perhaps. With the housing market being so crazy this year, we think that there's opportunities in-house to be able to look at ways to find land that's not able to be developed, but look at ways to gain access through some different street standards perhaps. Infill development could open up some additional land for development. Looking at street standards, changing some of those things. Again, trying to develop a more focused infill and redevelopment policy and plan for the city. And also 2 or 3 years ago, we did approach the council on accessory dwelling units. We think that has some potential if it's done properly, still protecting neighborhoods, but to be able to allow some amount of residential development, additional units within neighborhoods. Another thing we listed was digitizing our records and planning and code enforcement. While that's not as a jazzy of a planning operation, but it does provide an opportunity to modernize both for staff and for citizens and developers to be able to gain access more readily than have to open up our old paper files and file cabinets and make it more accessible. It fits in well with the rental registration program. And as we keep bringing up as a reoccurring theme with the pandemic, it's made it so much more difficult for citizens and anyone to come into our office. And it would be a great benefit to begin the digitizing of those records. We're working with community development, economic development, Misty Parker and her folks in Lincoln, and Heidi on implementing the Tree Street Transformation Plan. And then moving kind of towards the end of our memo, I want to give us time to talk to you and hear questions. If you have some about, we're always ongoing looking for ways to amend and improve our zoning ordinance. It's a daunting task, but it's just, we keep pecking away at it and things keep rising to the surface that are worthy of improvements. Things like shoreline zoning, marijuana, noise, sign standards, lodging, and building codes. And we're always looking for ways to implement the comprehensive plan. In your packet, I think it was attachment 5, was another lengthy spreadsheet that focused on tasks that planning and code enforcement in association with other departments have the opportunity to further the goals of the comprehensive plan, which is something that's going to always work on bettering our community. And so we wrap up our memo with concluding, kind of summarizing some of the same things that I just mentioned. I don't need to repeat those. We also want, as David mentioned, want to work closely as much as possible with economic and community development on their plan. And we also are looking and think there's ways to involve the city, the business community, and citizens in a collaborative effort on potentially finding ways to improve the quality of life. It's one thing to be operating in planning and code enforcement, but just like the comprehensive plan relies on lots of public input from the entire community, we think all these initiatives that we've presented deserve to have additional input from citizens, from the business community, from realtors, developers, the banking community, and city departments, as we work together to kind of have a quick way to bring people together, talk about issues, and find and look for ways to make these improvements. So I've been on a roll, and I think I better stop at that point. And I don't know if Dave has anything else he wants to add, but we appreciate the opportunity to bring these things to you. One thing I did want to mention, and we appreciated some initial feedback from the mayor and Denis on what we presented to you all, and customer service, improving our services to the community, to developers. I just want to let you know is always foremost on our minds. It's something we deal with every day and look for ways to provide the best customer service. We also are working on redoing our applications for development review, and David can mention a bunch of other permits that are being revised to be online capable and that kind of thing. So again, thanks for the opportunity to bring all these good things in front of you, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts and comments.
Yeah, I would just add, I mean, we're hoping that you guys have some questions or comments for our consideration. As much of tonight is to really plant the seed. I mean, the council has been great over the last several years, where we actually have really like some planning efforts going now. You folks have funded a planning position in addition to what Doug and I can offer, the land use planner position. We haven't had that probably for 15, 16 years. So we're actually trying to be proactive here, whereas we really haven't had that opportunity. Again, the council has also funded the Riverfront Master Plan over the years, and that's, you know, the implementation of the comprehensive plan. You folks helped us get a consultant to help us with the design standards that we just adopted. So I'm kind of excited because some of these things that have been sitting on a shelf prior to me being here, and since I've been here, we're actually starting to do something with them. You guys have been supportive of making that happen. So it's good. You know, part of this is to make you folks realize that I think some of your decisions are hopefully paying off here going forward. There is a ton of attachments here for you guys. Again, our goal wasn't to bore you with statistics, but just to make you realize that, where some of these numbers are coming from. Certainly, if you have questions about those, ask us tonight or ask us offline somehow, and we can give you some more data if necessary. Usually, I know my experience with you folks is usually when you have a constituent complaining on the code side of the shop. So to be able to talk to you guys about some planning initiatives and trying to do positive things is a good opportunity for us. So certainly, Doug and I are here for any questions you guys might have.
So I have a quick question. We hear the term fast track a lot in the planning departments throughout the state. So how would you, one, do you believe Lewiston has a program that would be related to fast tracking development or permitting? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that's a matter of perspective. If you're in a more urban development city, Lewiston, Auburn, Portland, there's a process. There's just more rules. These communities have had zoning for many years. There's decades of amendments and language in there, for better, for worse. You go to a rural community, there's no zoning in some cases. You don't have to have zoning. You may be dealing just with DEP at that point. When we deal with property owners and developers from Southern Maine, they think our process is the smoothest thing in the world. We deal with somebody from north and west of Lewiston. We're very onerous. Our restrictions are difficult and they're complicated. So I think it's a matter of perspective. At the same time, we've done certain things over the years to try to streamline the process. One of the comments Doug mentioned was a staff review committee, where it's a less formal review process for applicants to get through. They still have to meet all of our code requirements, but they're dealing directly with staff. They're working one-on-one with Doug and Jimmy and Public Works. So it's a good opportunity for property owners to get through a process versus having to go to a citizen board. We've talked about increasing that threshold potentially. We've also talked about increasing the threshold where a public hearing isn't necessary. But Doug and I have talked about this. I mean, part of the challenge with municipal government, and especially our department, both on the planning and code side, is to be transparent and get public input. Life is a lot quicker if we don't have to involve the public. But that's when things tend to get more controversial, or how come I wasn't informed of a situation? So we can talk about fast tracking, but it really depends on what exactly you want to get approved. If it's a permit, if it's development review, I'm certainly open to people's thoughts about where things feel like they're getting held up.
David, if I could just add to that, a great deal of the fast tracking is the application process, something we're working on, making it more available online, providing all the links to our zoning and zoning ordinance, that if a developer can have the resources that they can put together an application online, that can save them time. Time is money for them. And the other thing I would just add is, it's been my experience, especially in places I hear about how things are in Portland, for example, but we make a real effort to work with applicants for whether it's minor or major developments to take them to the finish line in one planning board meeting. And we're very thorough about, if there's any problems or issues, we will work with them to resolve it before we get to the meeting, so they don't have to be postponed because something comes up at the last second. So we think we do a good job of that, but like I say, we're always looking for ways to improve the process.
And that's probably something people don't really realize, is a lot of communities, it's a multiple meeting process before the planning board. I think we do a great job to build upon what Doug said. And I think the planning board recognizes this too. If we don't get something approved in one meeting, staff's probably screwed up. We spend more time with the people ahead of time to make sure everything is ironed out as much as possible for that very reason. And we know that applicants appreciate that. But it also may slow things up too before you get to the planning board, because Doug and I don't want to schedule something knowing that we don't have all of our ducks lined up. And if the applicant wants to go forward with it, that's fine. But at the same time, we rather say, hold up, deal with us. It may delay it a couple of weeks, but your certainty of getting approval is going to increase. And the idea that's the biggest thing we hear from developers is they just want certainty. They don't like the unknowns.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Clement, then Councilor Gelinas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Doug and David, great report. A lot of effort put into this. I appreciate the information. And one thing, Doug, that you mentioned, I don't think can be emphasized enough, but that is customer service, making things easier for the customer in any way possible. Keep it up. That is to be commended. And I think not only commended, but is to be expected of any modern code enforcement and planning agency. So keep it up, and let's continue to develop and keep things rolling here. Lewiston is in need, and I think anything we can do to improve that process is definitely a wonderful thing. And I thank you.
Thank you.
Doug mentioned the development review application. I'm hoping, I don't know if it's going to happen by the end of the year, but certainly in the next couple of months, we're redoing all of our applications on the code side too, building permit applications. We're hoping that's going to be a better process for applicants as well as staff and intaking on these applications. And we're coming up with, some people might get overwhelmed actually, because what was a 1-page application is now going to be a 4 or 5-page application, but it's going to spell out everything. It's going to have all the expectations in it. So again, the thought is if we can get them that information ahead of time, they're more likely to succeed. At least that's what we're planning on, as far as them getting the information to us right the first time.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Gelinas, and then Councilor Rea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you, Mr. Hediger and Mr. Green. This is an amazing thing. As I was reading it today, it was such a bright light at a time when we've been so burdened with other stuff. So it's exciting to realize just how much has gone on and can go on. I guess the part that I really enjoyed, Mr. Green, was when you talked about just the importance of the collaboration. So beyond just making it, customer friendly, really looking at strong partnerships with our community. I think about, continue to make the city great. It's really about those partnerships and getting citizens to help us in that brainstorming of new initiatives and those kinds of things. So I really enjoyed that. And I just wanted to say thank you to both.
Okay, Councilor Rea, and then Councilor Pettengill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really thought attachment 1 was super helpful, seeing the comparison and, the total value is so impressive year over year. I had 2 questions and maybe I missed this first one. There's a lot of info in here. I didn't see anything about the trash and recycling campaigns that were done maybe last year. Time is not linear anymore, I feel like. So whenever that happened and the role that plays into the whole plan.
You're right. We should have thrown that in. That was, I think Doug would agree that we got mixed results out of that.
Okay.
It resonated with the wrong people. We had people in single family homes that were absolutely freaking out about trash policies that they didn't know were in effect for many years. And single family neighborhoods really aren't where we have issues with solid waste. So I think we got some mileage out of it. Certainly, the outreach, we continue to use that pamphlet because it has a lot of good information on it. But I think it's fair to say that solid waste is a challenge for our department as well as many others, and we're just one piece of that. That really is a discussion that involves Public Works, Treasurer's Department, and our office as far as making that work.
And I could just add to that. While I think it's great that there's been a recycling committee, I think that there's room for maybe additional work at some level on the solid waste, like David mentioned. I think that we realize that the work is not done, that what we did was just a step. And I think we need to look at the bigger picture of ways to improve the system.
Yeah, I think it's one of the bigger constituent complaints over my past 3 years. And so some recognition of that in this would be helpful. The other thing I had a question on, so the CMP project coming before the planning board on Monday, Is there any way that we can be supportive of that? I mean, it wasn't this council that voted on supporting that project, it was previous council. So I'm not sure if there's something we should do to reaffirm that, or if the mayor is able and would be willing to write a letter to add to that file, just to make sure it moves forward.
Just to be clear, we thought it was going to be heard on the 14th, and at this point it's been moved to the 28th.
28th, okay.
Yeah, and we've been working with CMP and their associates and contractors for a year and a half. And again, like David mentioned, this is another project where by working with the applicant for a long period of time, we've identified things that could be a problem. They've hired the top professionals, and they've eliminated, from our perspective, any technical or zoning problems. So while it's a little early to issue a staff recommendation, but we don't see any real problem with it. Any way that the council wants to support this, that's great. And we'll definitely keep you posted on when the planning board is going to be meeting.
That's great. I think, I've been hearing about it since I was a councillor-elect. And so as it continues to move forward and all of the developments, being kept in the loop has been really great on that. And I guess I didn't realize before, I haven't heard it verbalized about the work you all do before you bring something to the board, but it makes sense that you have such a high success rate as a result. And it really comes to bear with the votes that are taken based on all of the information you provide to us and the planning board. So thank you for that. And I hope that continues.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Pettengill.
So I wanted to kind of echo those sentiments from way back yonder when I was a member of the planning board with Mr. Hediger. It's the one department that consistently, on a regular basis, always talks about ways to improve their service and improve what they can do for anybody that needs to interact with that department. And somebody that's served on the board with them, it really shows. So, thank you for that continued dedication to providing that consistency. And then just something to throw out there too, that kind of hit me this weekend. As we talk about all these economic development plans and all these plans to better the city and the quality of life, we always look to how we can do roads better or streets better or attract this business and that business. But one thing I think that often falls by the wayside is we forget to look at how we can have fun and how we can attract fun here. Because that fundamental question at the end of the day, when we all check out or go home or, what we're going to do for the weekend, everybody just wants to have a little bit of fun, whether it's going skating or going to hang out in a park or going to fly a kite. Something like that. So I think it's important that we keep that just as up there with, ways that we're going to drive tax revenue to the bottom line so we can pay for the services that we offer. But that's my 2 cents. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
I'm sure Doug could add to this, but it's certainly apparent in Lewiston, Auburn, as it is across the country right now. If your idea of fun is being outside and recreating, there's never been more of a demand than now to use public amenities and spaces like that. It really shows the importance of those types of amenities in your community, not just for, growth and attraction, but, situations like this where you want to get outside, you need to be outside. So, kudos to what the councils and previous councils have actually done and approved, to get us where we are. And there's a lot more to be done.
I just have a couple more questions. So out of that 308 million, Doug, is that number includes the Central Main Power project as well?
It does. And just to be clear too, the Central Main Power NICEC there's 3 different components. There's going to be the converter station, and then the transmission lines will be filed in 2 separate applications that could add some more value. But I want to, also make it known that just because you get a plan approved doesn't make it a taxable occupied finished space. So, we have a ways to go to get that approved, to get it constructed, but it's a huge thing for the community.
Right. Yeah, that's going to be a game changer for our community in many ways, including hopefully some meaningful property tax reduction. And then, so also of that 308 million, how do you have an idea of how much of that is non-taxable property improvements versus taxable property?
Not at this moment, but it wouldn't take much to be able to separate out what goes where as far as those categories go.
And then finally, just a quick question. When you speak about updating our Riverfront Island Master Plan, which when I read that in the report, I said, oh, it's been so long, we really should be looking at that again. Are you talking by use of, like a staff review for that?
What we kind of, the timing actually was kind of coinciding with our looking at the LCIP and future planning initiatives. So we were looking at what planning initiatives are beyond the ability of staff to do it all. And so that's one that we were thinking that we would want to hire some outside help for parts and pieces of those different components. Again, we try to isolate things that all kind of fit together in a package. So yeah, there would be some consulting proposals that we'd like to work with you all on that.
Okay.
It wasn't necessarily a revisit of the entire plan, which may be warranted at some point, but kind of a plan within a plan. You folks have had discussions with the owners of the Continental Mill, with people looking at the gatehouse down there, and Museum LA, the PAMCO building. There's a potential for that area to just absolutely blow up down there, which would be beautiful. But there's a lot of things that could blow up down there. And so we have a big plan, from 30,000 square feet, and we're talking about getting a little closer to the ground with how do we actually make this work? How do we get everybody to play together?
All right, good. Well, thank you. I was really happy to see these documents that you sent, and I think the rest of the council recognize the value of that. So I look forward to potentially that being incorporated into our economic development plan or whatever the next steps will be. Okay, councilors, any other questions or comments in reference to this? Okay, then you all have to help us move into executive session. So Kathy, where there's no anticipated action from these, can we just do one motion to move into both of these executive sessions?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to enter into an executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Section 4056 E, to discuss a legal matter with our city attorney, as well as to enter into an executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Section 4056 E, to discuss a legal matter with contract negotiations. Counselor from Ward 1.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
And seconded by Counselor LaJoy. Call the roll, please.
Council from Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6. Councilor Clement, I think you're muted. Just give me a thumbs up. Perfect, thank you. And Ward 7.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
All right, thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.